glitch. Egg of Zanyazu si Elon Musk, Biba. All right, hungen. Okay, naizon rato. Bitsek. Bena siguro na matsotso este live stream gi YouTube. Hungen, hungen matsotso. Biba, biba. All right. Buenas and hafa de todos hamzo buena hodzongi. Este gi un nuevo episode Fanachu guawi host midzu tatlo. Inan husi Michael Luhan Bavakwa hafa day. We are back once again with Fanachu, and I'm your host, Michael Luhan Bavakwa, here with Atanesti. Look at me. I have my sinahi right here. I'm wearing, this is the third sinahi that I have worn in my life. The first sinahi that I wore was made by that I've ever worn was made by Greg Pangilinan. That was one that I got when I was like 21, 22 years old. That was the one that my grandfather and me fought over, because my grandfather said, "Hey, tautomona and now you can't wear that in the house," because sinahis were still pretty new back then, and so my grandfather was like, "Hey, I see those at laddie sites. That's got spirits on it. You can't wear that in the house." And so that was the first sinahi that I got. When I took it home from the Micronesian Island Fair after I spent my student loan check on buying it from Greg Pangilinan, it sat on the bench outside my grandparents' house in Manila for a few days until my grandfather was sure it had no spirits attached to it. The second sinahi that I got was from Jill Beneventi. That was my PhD sinahi. When I was leaving to go get my PhD, Jill Beneventi, who was in her container store, Guenahan Chamoru in Manila, she called me in because she heard I was leaving to go get my PhD, because a few years before that, I had joined the group Nashon Chamorro. And so she said, you know, here is your Sinahi. If you finish your PhD, you do not have to pay me for it. It's a gift. If you don't finish your PhD, you have to pay me for it. And so I finished my PhD. Biba. And then this is my midlife crisis Sinahi. And so this one I got when I hit midlife crisis, and I was like, man, there's all these guys out there that have like the Lamborghini Sinahis, that have like the big ass, like Ford truck Sinahis. I need a bigger Sinahi too, because I'm going to start losing my hair soon. I need a big Sinahi. So I went to Sagan Kuturan tomorrow and I got a slightly bigger Sinahi. This one is made by Joe Guerrero. And so this is the third Sinahi that I have gotten in my life. And so I share these stories now, though, because this is one of the ways in which people today, Chamorros today, have reconnected to Hima, the giant clam shell. And this is something which, for hundreds of years after colonization, we were not as connected to. But for thousands of years, Chamorros used this shell as a precious material to make tools, to make jewelry. It was a very important part of their lives. And it's very special the way that through the work of carvers, through the work of historians, through the work of cultural practitioners, we have made it an important part of our lives again. And so, in light of recent discussions from federal agencies that may make the use of giant clamshell jewelry, the harvesting of giant clamshells that may prohibit that, I decided to invite on to the Fanachu podcast two active Chamorro carvers and cultural practitioners. I have with me here Roman Duenas and Hila'an San Nicolas, and I want them to talk about the carving of Hima, the importance of Hima to the Chamorro people, and if they'll give you a discount if you're going through a midlife crisis like I am. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. And so, Hungen, so por favor, Roman Hago Finetna, just introducing myself Finetna.
Guaco si Roman Duenas. I've been a carver for maybe around maybe 5 or 6 years. Been working with Sina Great Pangilinan, and yeah, it's great to be here.
Hey, si Zeus Masi. The Hila'an Hago Hago, por favor, introducing myself.
Buenas, Wahoo, si Hila'an sa Nicolas. I started carving around 2015, and yeah, it's been a good journey, and I'm very honored to be here. Si Zeus Mosis and Sana Mosi na un epukam mogi.
No, Hamzu Mas. Hungen, and so so for those of you listening, Hima is giant clamshell. And so let's first start off by talking about who wants to talk about this issue in terms of I know there was some public hearings, some public community meetings that happened recently. Did either of you attend those community meetings? There was the ones that Fish and Wild Department of Agriculture held. Do either of you want to talk about sort of what happened and what was discussed there?
So I only got to go to the first hour of the first day of that. Unfortunately, my time slot for that evening was really limited, but I did get to sit through the Miss Chelsea's substitute presentation of the slideshow that you had prepared. So yeah, I was bummed that you weren't able to make it on time for that. I was really looking forward to your presentation. I know you could have provided a lot of context and insight. But yeah, and then shortly after that, I had to leave.
Oh, Tadzwa, Roman, did you make it to any of the meetings?
You know, the very last one, I made it a point to go, but I thought it started at 9, but it was actually 10. So I got there too early, and because of that, I had to leave. I had to leave early, so I didn't get to even see the presentation at all, unfortunately.
So for those of you watching, does one of you want to address just the importance of Hima for sort of the Chamorro people historically? And we can share and we can all talk, because I can also join in too. So what are some of the things in the past that Chamorros used to make used Hima to create?
Sure, I'd like to chime in on this. The Hima is crazy important to our people historically, culturally, spiritually. The Hima, we have been using the Hima since before we ever even came to our islands. You know, we arrived here via canoe, and wherever those people, those first settlers had come from, they had to carve their canoes there first. And Hima just happened to make some of the best adzes for cutting and carving wood. So even since before we were ever Chamorros in the Marianas, we had a very close relationship to the Hima. The Hima was super, super widely and commonly used to make adzes. And it was literally the cutting edge technology of its time. It was abundant, and I theorize through experimentation of carving a Hima gatsai, adze blade, completely by traditional means, no power tools. I can accomplish that in about an hour, 20 minutes. So ancient Chamorros who had to rely on this skill every day, they understood the Hima so well and were so practiced in it. I bet they could bang one out in like 30 minutes. But yeah, Hima was used as a tool. Well, first as you know, a source of sustenance, and then secondly as a tool to carve canoes, to carve beams for houses, you know, for in situations of dire need, it was used as a weapon for self-defense. And the Hima was there with our people, you know, alongside us through our entire timeline. It is what we used to create our society. It was what we used to raise our villages and raise our families. It was, if you think about it, a tool for the ultimate expression of sovereignty. It is what we use to create our world, you know, to express our autonomy as a people. And even on top of that, on top of being a tool, it it allowed us to create a an environment for ourselves that we were able to thrive so well in, that we could even use it to create jewelry. And you know, it's said that a culture that is creating art is a culture that is thriving, because it's not too focused on merely surviving. You know, they have excess time, you know, and energy to expend. So the presence of Hima art, body ornamentation in our history is an indication that we thrived, you know, and the Hima is largely responsible for that. Yeah.
No, Sidus Masi. Sidus Masi Hila'an. I wanted to share real fast, and Roman, I want to hear from you next, and I wanted to share, you know, these are some Hima here from and speaking to providing some material insight into what Hila'an was sharing. You know, the higam Hima is a very common tool that is found sort of from our ancestors, because it was so essential and necessary, because you used it, you know, for making homes, for making the lati later, probably for carving the canoes, so essential in life. And so these are actually from the Hyatt. So when the Hyatt was built, in the Guam Museum, there's several boxes that are filled entirely with higam. And so amazing pieces, some big, some small, some fine, just beautiful. It's beautiful to just see them. And then when you hold on, I'll share a few more, because I'll share some more pictures, because when you look at them, you can, what's cool is that you can really just get a sense of even just some of the some of the you can even just kind of imagine who made it, who used it, you know, what they might have used it for, you know, just in terms of like yeah, what the blade is like, the length of the blade, and so on. So uh Roman, I want to give you a chance now to talk sort of about the Hima as well.
Right. So I think just as like carvers of Guam, the Hima is so important in just this day and age, because of it literally, like if you think about like fossil Hima, it how long it takes for the Hima to live and die, and then for the island to have come up out of the water, and then the fossilization process to begin. Like I think one biologist estimated that some of the Hima that we use that's fossilized is about like 350 to 500 million years old. And if you think of like what the fossilization process is, it's super interesting. Like like a question I love to get asked is what kind of stone is that? And then I'm just like, oh yeah, now I can like talk about Hima. It's like this is actually not a stone, so it has stripes in it because of the crystallization, and then I tell them like how long it takes to fossilize historical uses of Hima to the Chamorro people, and then I get to just highlight just like just today like how how we can use it as like it's like a resource that's very not only significant but also really, it's a word I'm looking for, like very unique to our culture, because like for our island to have so much Hima, it kind of shows how plentiful our waters have been, and it's a reminder of that we also we also need to, like someday these ones will we might run out of fossilized giant clam. So it helps us think about that too. But some of the artifacts that I've seen out of Hima, just like those small higam there, like some artifacts I've seen from clams are they're so small, like small adzes, small scraping tools, and it goes to show you how valuable it was, because they really, our ancestors didn't want to waste anything. There's even a lot of Hima, there's even a lot of clam tools where the edge of it is at an angle because of how the shell was, and they didn't want to just waste it. They wanted, even though the tip might have broke off, they wanted to refile it down so it could still have a purpose. Yeah.
No, Sidus Masi. Oh, here's another piece I just wanted to share. This is a nice one. Also from the Hyatt dig. Very nice. Boy.
Wonder if that,
Check out the striations on that thing.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is yeah, kalangizonya imagalahi esti buentiambi.
Yeah.
This is like munga mapatsesti zoni magalahi esti ambi. I'm like, oh man, but this is again, and one of the things, at least for independent Guahan, when we were trying to figure out a way to try to, when we were thinking about symbols for our group, one of the first symbols that we thought of was really the higam, because it's one of those tools that you create with, but then thinking then about the story of Magalahi Agao, who fought off a squad of Spanish soldiers in 1672 using just a higam, who held them at bay. And then so we thought that it was like a great metaphor that you build for the future using the higam, but then if you need to, you also defend as a means of last resort. You also defend with it only as a means, though. And so for independent Guahan, we didn't end up using it for it, but that's actually where the Fanachu logo comes from. So the Fanachu logo actually has the higam in it. Inspired by the story of Magalahi Agao, and I've been, a few months ago, I had on Rafa Pinko, who made the very, very low budget independent film, The Assassination of Magalahi Harao, with Clint Rigel. And so, oh yeah, no, and so they reenact that scene, and in which Harao is invited after the death of San Vittorius to a peace meeting, and then Harao, a blind elder, and then Magalahi Agao are brought there, but the Spanish allow Agao to keep his higam because they don't consider it to be a weapon. It's not a threat. And then they execute Harao, and then Agao fights off the soldiers and escapes using just the higam. And so, but yeah, so I got to get them. I want to get them together for a future Fanachu episode so they can watch that and then react to that film, because it's so the late Tony Ada plays Magalahi Harao, and then Ronak Fadzi plays Magalahi Agao. Uses some kung fu moves to with the higam to fight off the Spanish soldiers. And I played the evil Spanish priest. I played the evil Spanish priest. Yeah, that was my claim to fame in that film. But so but yes, so we have some questions that are coming in now. But so I wanted to hear your thoughts though about this possibility of Chamorro, you know, about the federal government making making a living Hima sort of a protected species, but then how then that may infringe on using fossilized Hima, right? Because we know I can tell you this, that when you travel to other countries, because there are rules about protections about giant clamshell around the world. When you travel to other countries, you have to be careful because sometimes they'll confiscate it because you're not allowed. Like when I'm in the Caribbean, I take off my sinahi and I pack it because they might confiscate it. I lost a sinahi, excuse me, a Hima bracelet once there when they confiscated it at an airport. Because because I couldn't prove that it was from Guam. They assumed that I had taken it from the waters there. And so the proposal though will protect giant clam Hima, but the problem though is that it may infringe by default adjacently. It may infringe then on carvers. It may infringe on people who just want to wear sinahis, so that like the next time you come into the Guam International Airport, they might take your sinahi and assume, hey, can you prove that that didn't come from a living giant clamshell? And how do you prove it? Are you going to get a note from Roman Duenas that says, this Hima died 25 million years ago? I was there at the Lisalzu for it. I can prove it. I ate the corn soup at the Lisalzu for this Hima 25 million years ago. And so I wanted to hear your thoughts on this issue, because I think it's tied to so many issues in terms of our political status, and sort of, Chamorros being, a colonized people. And so, who wants to go first?
Uh, okay, I guess. So I think at the very like basic level, I feel like our people should be given the opportunity to come up with solutions, and we need to look at other places, like especially Palau, where they do have they have a robust clam farming system there, and ours is still starting. At least we have something, but I feel like this whole the federal government's is like proposal, it really surprised a lot of us because it just kind of came out of nowhere. And then, of course, there's like a period where we get to talk about it at these meetings, but it's like I feel like we should be able to discuss what what we can do about it, and not just always look to the federal government for guidance, but look to our brothers and sisters in other islands too. And of course, like what you mentioned before, Miguel, about how people are they're not aware even of like the difference between fossil and fresh Hima. And of course that extends to the government, but even a lot of people in Guam are surprised that our clams, the clams that for the most part that we use as carvers, are fossilized. For the for the bigger pieces that we make, we use fossilized clam. And a lot of people don't know that. So I think when they put out this notice about giant clams being some species just added to the endangered list because they're very similar to the to the giant clams that are already on that list, like it makes it seem like the carvers are the ones taking all the giant clam out of the ocean. And yeah, that's not that's not the case at all. So I think as a community of people, we're just more aware like the threats to giant clam, the differences between the fresh clams and the fossil giant clams, then we could kind of build we come up with our own solutions.
No, c'est justement ça. C'est justement ça. That's a very good point. Just that the unintended consequences, right? Is that debido makonsidera adunay na hunggan buenti federales estima hahasu lo coma considera taimano naman ineffecta I tautauta nuesti loqui. And so I really hope that they're hearing all this, because I think it's very clear that the community response is very much against this. That even if it's well intended, the community response is very much against it because of how it could negatively affect things that have been so important to the people and continue to be so important to the people. And so what you're proposing there is important. Like, how could there be a way that we learn from how others are doing it so that it doesn't affect negatively carvers or people who are expressing their identity? Because those are the concerns that people have. Hila'an, put fabot. Ihinasomo podestisyan.
And in regards to a cultural people having rights to their natural resources, I believe that exceptions can be made, but they have to be done in good faith. I think that Noah can gain a lot from working with and collaborating with native people, artists, and fishermen, those who rely and depend on the resources that they are attempting to regulate. Because we will be the ones most directly impacted and affected. And the way that they're framing this proposal makes it seem as if carvers are being specifically targeted. And this is an opinion that I've kind of come to through discussion with other carvers. Carvers feel directly disrespected by this. Because we carvers are not the problem. We carvers, at least the newer generation, the ones who have taken a little bit of a more cultural approach rather than just a commercial approach to carving as an art form and as a cultural practice. We typically do believe in, proper conservation methods. I don't know of any carvers in our new generation who actively go out to the reef and harvest giant clams. I don't even know anybody in our generation who has seen a live giant clam in the waters of Guam in the last 30 to 35 years. Maybe one person I know. Also, because they Noah and the federales are unable to distinguish between the types of clams, I believe that rather than digging their heels deeper and working against us, they can come to us and ask us how to distinguish. We can be part of, because I'm all for the conservation and protection of endangered species. Don't get me wrong. Yes, we have a right to our own resources as Native people, but if we also have a right to protect them first and foremost, so that these things exist in our lands and in our waters for as long as they can. Because with the existence of these resources, there is an entire wealth and world of cultural knowledge that surrounds them. And if we lose the resource, we lose all of that wisdom that surrounds it. So I believe that Noah and the federales really should definitely work in collaboration with indigenous carvers and fishermen. because I, as a carver, I've been doing this nearly a decade, and I better than most people, I have an eye for being able to distinguish between fresh reef clam, fossilized clam, and fresh giant clam. There is a certain look to the material, you know, and it's not fair that they would punish us, just blanket punish us, and make us all deal with the broad general consequence like that when they are the ones who cannot distinguish and enforce their own policy that they are proposing. It's the onus is not on us to prove that our Hima is legit. It's on them who are proposing the policy to be able to enforce their own policies. And if that includes being able to distinguish between different types of Hima, then that's on them. And if they do this the right way, they can ask us to collaborate. They can ask to learn with and from us. We are the native people. We have the rights to our resources, to use them, but first and foremost, to protect them so that not only we can use them, but the generations after us can use them and grow up immersed in the cultural bodies of knowledge that surround these resources. And yeah, that's what I believe.
C'est justement ça. C'est justement ça. We have a lot of people that are tuning in. And so Hungen, and we've got actually Senor Noel Kitagua has tuned in, and he actually says that one of the pieces that we were looking at earlier may be a chisel instead of a Hungen, instead of a higam. And then we've got a lot of questions, some of which you've already answered in terms of is it true that people Hungan, is it true that there's actually Hima here that is endangered, that needs to be protected because people are saying they've never even seen the giant clams anymore on the reef? And so Hungan, hold on, let me see here. Let me find a question for you. People, oh yeah, Vince Poole is saying that the NOAA team was so unknowledgeable and unprepared when they came here. He says that it's like they were trying to protect something that exists only in other countries. And so it didn't seem like it seemed like they were just trying to extend a protection like that exists other places rather than trying to really deal with something that's here. Maria Hernandez says, we need to unite with the Tautausianamai in opposing this ban because they are affected by this as well. And Hila'an, you mentioned that you've been talking to carvers in the CNMI too, I think, right? And so any idea, have either of you heard from people in the CNMI? Because I know they had some community meetings up there as well. And so have you heard anything from the response up there too?
I've just lightly discussed with one of the other young carvers in the north. The Instagram handle is Gininitasi, and they really share a lot of the same sentiments as we do. I feel like, oh, another thing I'd like to add is that, you know, I include fishermen in my piece as well, not just carvers, because part of the proposal to you know, consider giant clam an endangered species is to also list their habitats as marine protected areas, and their habitats include the entirety of the coast of Guam. So that opens up the possibility for even more strict regulation in marine protected areas that are considered habitat for giant clam. This is a problem because it can affect like the Guam Coral Initiative. You know, they might have to go, you know, get way more permits or jump through a whole lot of different loops just to continue their work. And their work is like important work and not necessarily pertinent to the Hima. but will be affected if they are prevented from being able to perform their duties because their their area overlaps with Hima habitat. You know what I'm saying? And also another thing that I learned from the hour that I did get to sit in at the Hima meeting, the Doag Hima meeting, is that if this ban goes through, it will actually make it illegal to import giant clam here, and it would make it illegal to propagate giant clam in the wild. And to me, that seems like completely counterintuitive. If it's endangered, do we not have a responsibility to try and save it and rehabilitate it rather than just let it be endangered and slowly watch it dwindle? You know? So these are things that I've heard. I don't know, how true or how accurate, but this is just, yeah.
Sedus Masi. Sedus Masi. And we've got a lot of comments and a lot of people echoing what have been shared. We've got my Pari Jess Tsatgwalaf. He's asking, is it true that the Hima that we use are not actually the Hima that are endangered, that they're just being lumped together in the language as similar species? Is it true that our carvers use the fossilized Hima for carving and rarely kill live ones? Why don't they have practitioner input on this, Hungen? He also says, Sidzus Masi to the both of you, Parei Meneswan Midzu, for speaking out. Hold on, more. And then, so here's something. And if anyone who's watching, because I know there's a bunch of people watching too, this is a question asked by, were there any Chamorros that were on the NOAA team? So anyone from the federal side, did they have any Chamorros that were working with them directly? Because I know that Department of Agriculture was originally kind of talking to them, but then eventually not working with them. I think they got kind of frustrated with them. And that's why there was the two separate public community meetings on it, was they got a little bit frustrated working with them. And so if anyone knows if there was anyone that they were talking to or working with, I think that would be important. And so Vince Poole has said, NOAA has already confirmed that the endangered clam species do not exist here or in other U.S. protectorates, but they are only trying to protect species on a global scale to enforce policies in their own jurisdiction. So he's saying that NOAA, that this has nothing to do with Guam at all. It's just a federal global thing, and it's not even necessarily an issue of how it would affect us at all. And so thoughts. Roman, did you have any thoughts now after hearing about all those comments? Go ahead.
So I will say though, I have a lot of fond memories of people bringing in fossilized giant clam, not fresh, fossilized giant clam to my Uncle Greg's shop, and he'll barter with them, for it and things like that. And a lot of times they get it from construction projects where they dig it up. And I'm willing to bet that there are so many times where they're digging into a bunch of giant clam and just crushing it without even realizing what it is. Because if you look at a fossil giant clam that's encased in limestone, a lot of times from certain angles, it doesn't even look like just looks like a rock. And I think like this discussion we're having, it can open up a lot of just potential connection between us that use this material and also people in different fields where they might come across these things. And I wanted to share that like there are some, of course, like there's like, I think the three biggest giant clam species, if I'm not mistaken, are the Tridacna gigas, which is the biggest one, and then there's the Tridacna maxima. I think it might grow bigger than the Tridacna gigas, but I don't know if the the center is as thick as a Tridacna gigas. And then the third one is the hippopus. So I just wanted to share that there's the hippopus is one of the ones in the where is that? Oh, it's one of the ones being listed for the I think it's for the similarity. Let me see. Tridacna. Just a second. Yeah, it's being endangered not for the similarity, but because it's close to extinction. So we still, I think, in the wild, I've seen people find like just the empty clams, but I don't know how long ago it was, but I've seen one that was fresh, and I have here a fossilized hippopus shell. It's I think the same one that they call the bear claw clam. So this is not a Tridacna gigas, but and then of course this is not the biggest it can grow. But if you see how thick the shell is, if you look at modern examples of living ones from other places, the thickest part is not as thick as this. So this could probably make a sinahi, not as big as the one that you're wearing may get, but you know, pretty like a nice little sinahi. So a lot of we tend to use the fossilized giant clam because of how big they grew a long time ago, and I think that like just in my experience, the clams that I have seen, the clams that I have processed were Tridacna gigas that were fossilized.
No, Sidus Masi. Now, it's good. I'm glad that we're talking about this, and but I also want to move on to something a little bit, a little bit more inspirational. And Maria Hernandez is asking, when is the next Coutura party for us aspiring carvers? Because, this is one of the reasons why I think people are so angry and frustrated about this, is that after becoming disconnected from this part of our peoplehood through colonization, where we started wearing the crucifix, we started wearing other types of body adornment for a few centuries, finally we take joy in wearing jewelry and adorning ourselves in things from our land again, that come from the ocean, that come from the earth here, things that our ancestors wore in the past. And so I know that when you two were in the Bishop Museum earlier this year for FestPac, I don't think you got to see I don't think they had the sinahis out on display for all of
They
them.
only do.
Two.
What's that?
They
So
only
they had a bunch of Hornbostel found a bunch of sinahis.
wow.
And so there's quite a few over there. But and so the Sinahi is just one example of how, we have reconnected to the strength and the power of our ancestors and our land through body adornment and through the Hima. And so I want to ask each of you, as carvers, sort of what is something that you carved today using Hima or using other shell kind of brings joy or brings power to people that you love to share with others. And it doesn't have to be only Hima, but just as a carver, what is something that you really take a lot of pride in creating and then sharing with the community? And so Hila'an, if you want to go first.
Sure. So I'm sorry, you were kind of a little fuzzy there in the first half of the question. Do you mind just repeating it to me real quick?
Oh, dispensa. Hunga dispensa. So just what is something that you enjoy creating as a carver that you and it could be with Hima, but it could be with something else, but just something that you enjoy. So we've talked about kind of federal interference, but now let's just talk about the joy of this part of our lives today.
Okay. Yeah, I really, really enjoy carving higam and gatsai personally. Um, you know, so the sinahi came back into prominence right in the late 90s and early 2000s. And since then, it is absolutely boomed, right? And there is a lot of controversy around the sinahi. You know, there's certain factions who believe it to be different things. I've heard people say that they theorize it was used as a net sinker or some sort of fishing implement. But the majority, right, and this is because of Nashon Chamoru and the work that they did in the late 90s and early 2000s, the majority of people have come to accept the sinahi as being a necklace. And so the sinahi is a very, very prominent symbol of our people. But a lesser known artifact, one that I've seen numerous examples of, is a clamshell adze blade with a hole drilled into the top of it. And you know, this we already know the use of a clamshell adze blade. It's a tool. Definitively, we know for sure it's a tool. But with the presence of a hole that has been intentionally put at the top of this tool, that is a really strong suggestion to the possibility that it was used as a pendant, as a necklace. And you know, the gatsai neck as a necklace could represent a whole lot of different things. You know, it could have spiritual significance. It could have, you know, a lot of different significance. What if that gatsai or that higam that Agao used to defend himself against the Spanish, what if he got away and he said, "Oh, this is my lucky one. I'm gonna put a hole in this and I'm gonna wear it, and then my son will wear it, and his son will wear it." You know, so there's it's you know it's a strong suggestion. So one of the things that I've used my time and energy to kind of bring the public's attention to is the gatsai or the higam. It depends, you know, how you grow up learning it. In my family, we called the clamshell as blades. We called it gatsai. So that's one of the things that I enjoy carving the most. The gatsai is a really, really strong symbol for, you know, sovereignty, doing the work, you know, self-reliance, uh, you know, being empowered to create the world that you want to see around you, you know. And so carved into the gatsai is a Tao symbol because the gatsai and our personhood go hand in hand. So I've entitled this style of carving gatsai Tinautao, which means like the ads of personhood or the ads of our peoplehood. And it represents the connection between we have as people to the connection between we us as people and our work as people. You know, there's a quote by the late great Bob Marley, uh, and it goes, "I'm a living man and I have work to do." You know, and I think that part of the reason that we are all put here on this land is to continue the work, you know, the work that has been set before us, to be a link in the chain of Chamorro continuity, you know, to use our time and our energy to continue the goodness, the ingenuity, you know, the perseverance, the discipline of our ancestors. And you know, you don't have to be a carver to do that. You know, you could practice the values instilled in us by our grandparents and their grandparents, and that is practicing Chamorro culture. So all this to say, I think this piece represents that, and that is why I enjoy carving it.
Si Zeus Mase. No, si Zeus Mase. Govzahu ano na istorya, but si Agaw na za Buenti na ha. Hunggan Buenti ha sakbad za ha guud ano za Hungen hapegano na maduk. Wow, I like that. That's a love that. Roman Hogunai, for you, is there a particular piece that you want to share and talk about, and just as a reminder of why this is important. This is more than just shells. This is
Mhm.
more than just clam shells, right? This is the way that we feel this connection to our past, but also to each other, to everything. This is us today. So a particular piece that you want to talk about.
So, I love this discussion because it kind of opens up the public to just realize how many different, um, different like contemporary and even traditional pieces of jewelry there are in our culture. A lot of times when people just think the sinahi is the only type of jewelry that exists even today, and they assume that all carvers like to carve sinahi. I don't know about you, Hilan, but I do not like carving sinahi. I have to be in the mood for it because it's like, there's a lot of symmetry involved. There's a lot of like, you really have to be careful at certain parts, and it's a lot harder than people think. So can you imagine like artifact sanahis? It's like the fact that they were able to make those, it's just like it's really mind blowing, and I definitely respect it. But for me personally, man, I love to carve flowers, specifically the galsali, because I like to think of the path that material like the Hima has taken, right? So it started off as a living, breathing thing, and then after it's been processed, it's just like a slab of looks like a slab of stone, and then I take that and then I make something that looks like it's living once more. And I feel like just flowers can be very tiny, and I feel like that really just speaks to me because it's just something that's you can kind of hold it in your hand, you can put it in your pocket, you can wear it on, as a necklace. And I just love what the gausali represents, as a flower that it's a flower that's native, that grows only in difficult places, usually in limestone cracks, on sand, on cliff sides and things like that. And it's definitely a style, or it's definitely a symbol that has taken on a lot of meaning in the past few years in our culture.
Sidus Mase. I want to, okay, so can I makpuesti chimpotagwini or ratagwini pogo? So I want to give each of you though a chance to just share like a final thought before we close out our time on this episode of Fanachu. And it can be about anything that we've discussed. So if you want to kind of talk about the federal, protected species thing, you can talk about that. If you want to talk about the making of jewelry, you can talk about that. If you want to promote, your carving, you can promote your carving. If you want to say follow me here or buy my stuff here, you can say that if you want to. But just a final chance, just kind of to share whatever you'd like to help wrap up the discussion that we've had so far. And you can tell that we've really got a lot of people, like a lot of people intrigued and interested. We had, oh my goodness, we had at the high point, we had more than 60 people tuned in, watching across 5 different streams. And man, we've already got like there's already like more than 60 or 70 comments. And so
Wow.
there's quite a bit. Lots of people were tuning in and lots of people were sharing their thoughts and asking questions. And so I appreciate the both of you kind of helping guide this discussion. And so Hila'an, I'll give it to you first, just your final thoughts, and then Roman, you can close it then.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank you again for
Oh, Tio open how? Tio huhungo ka dispensa.
dispenser. Oh yes. First of all, I would just like to thank you for honoring Roman and myself with the opportunity to come and share our experiences and share our opinions. And for my closing opinion, I'd like to share that I believe the sinahi is a necklace. And this is through my experience of about nearly a decade carving it. And I I have seen ancient sinahi now, and there are a couple ancient sinahi in my family's possession as well. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the sinahi is a very, very, very delicate and tedious thing to make. And it doesn't make sense to use it in such a way that can compromise it. Uh, there's other things you can make sinkers out of that aren't as guaguan, in terms of time and effort, skill. Uh, and I do believe that sinahi was worn by leaders, maybe not even necessarily only men, but just leaders. And I do believe that it traditionally represents the moon. And the reason I believe this is because we follow a lunar calendar. Everything in nature follows the cycles of the moon. The life cycles of every plant, fish, crab, bird, animal follows the cycles of the moon. And so did we. And so they who wear the moon on the land are to be followed in the same sense as the moon in the sky, because those people already have a full and robust understanding of the cycles of the moon, the life cycles of everything else around them. And also, one last thing is that during the sinahi phase of the moon is the best time to harvest wood, fiber like poxy for rope, higai for houses, for roofing, is the best time to harvest under the crescent moon because they last a significant amount of time longer than if you harvest it under any other moon. And I think that's a metaphor for people who wear the sanahis. They understand life, they know how to survive, they know how to last long. And if anybody would like to take this discussion with me elsewhere, I'm open to it. I welcome it. So if you'd like, please follow me on Instagram at underscore menhalum underscore menhalom underscore. And please shoot me a message, and thank you.
All right, Sejus Masi, Hungan. We'll have a future episode. We'll have a just focused on the Sinahi, Hungan. That'll be fun. That'll be fun, Hungan. And so, because I'm always fascinated by people who think it's a sinker, and I'm always really curious because the arguments aren't Paraguajo. The arguments aren't very strong but anyways, otro compensation na syempre. All right. Roman Hogo Pogo na. Hafi mo na kwentos mo paresti.
Yeah, I just want to add that, yeah, definitely about the sinkers. There are some beautiful artifact sinkers that have been found, particularly the one in the Who Wears the Beads booklet with it's like a golf ball size sinker with the hole through the top of it. And that one is made out of giant clam. Man, and then, of course, there's sinkers, probably sling stones that were also used as sinkers too. And basically, I think that this is a good segue into just we should be allowed the opportunity to learn from our ancestors and from our people. And for a long time, a lot of people didn't know that the sinahi was something that Chamoros made and used because it's so hard to, like there's very few that were ever found. And a lot of it is because of the Hornbostel collection. A lot of it was taken from us. So now I can tell those people that, hey, like this is definitely something that that our ancestors used, probably as jewelry, because like Hila'an said, I cannot imagine taking the time to carve a delicate sinahi where the sides are very thin and then throwing that into the ocean to catch something. So yeah, so at the end of the day, we should be able to learn from the things that the people before us have taught us and continue to teach us. And it was just a great opportunity. Again, Maget, thank you. Even for the whole Bishop Museum, how we were able to go and learn so much. And it was just an honor. So thank you again.
Again, thank you.
Hamzumas, Hamzumas, Hamzumasen. Sidus masinu hamzuna dos, sidus masinu hamzu todos ni umega pod ume kung okesti episode Fanachu. Estigi Fanakpo estin episode, adios. Esta aqui manali.